Hey everybody, this is Brad from Johnson Small Engines, better known as the one-handed mechanic. If I can do it, you can too. Today we are working on a Poulan Pro 27-inch self-propelled two-stage snow thrower, and this has the LCT engine. So this engine is the lowest quality, in my opinion, China engine imported for the U.S. company LCT. I am not fond of it. It has more issues with their carburetors when the gas starts to turn bad. And this one here came in because it does not run. And we're going to go ahead and diagnose it. I already did change the oil. The oil was extremely high. It had gas contaminated in it. And it needed to be done before I even started the process of diagnosing it. So we're going to go ahead and get into this thing. The first thing I'm going to have you do is check your oil. So let's get started. This is a dipstick screw-in type. And with this particular engine, now I did change the oil. You have two dots on here. You have a low, an add, and a full mark. You're going to wipe off the dipstick. You're going to screw this in all the way, unscrew it, and it should be right about the top hole right there. I just put in 5W30. That's what I use on all the snow blowers anymore. The thinner weight is what they ask for. Screw it in. We're good to go there. If your oil smells like gas, and I want to show you a picture on where the line was on this oil when I checked it the first time. And you can see on that picture that it was up way high. It smelled like gasoline. What that is your carburetor had an issue internally and it let all the gas, not all of it, but that's the next thing too, is check your gas. But the gas went through the carburetor into the engine. This guy here has a fresh tank. Pretty sure he told me he put fresh fuel in here. I'm taking out the little filter just so I can see at the bottom of the tank. The tank looks fairly clean. And take a whiff of your gas, and this definitely smells and looks fresh. If it smells like turpentine, bad sign. You're probably going to need a carburetor. This looks pretty good inside there. Make sure there's no debris in the bottom of the tank. I usually use a turkey baster, a plastic one that I use, and I can squeeze out the stuff from the bad stuff. Good tank here of gas. We have fresh oil. Now, this is nice that down here we actually have a fuel shutoff, which is really nice. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn the fuel on. Pretty straightforward. Make sure it's on run. This is a cutoff switch key, and if it's not all the way in, and you'll feel it click in, okay? If it's not all the way in, that's a shutoff. It will shut down. Now, this does not have a throttle. It's pretty much start, which is choke on, and then choke off, which is run here. It says run. I usually put in magic marker either off and on, but I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Start, and then you put it back to run when it starts up. You have a primer bulb here, and you're going to go ahead and prime it 1, 2, 3 times. We left it on the start position, which is choke on. We're going to now, as far as giving it a pull and seeing if it'll run, when you pull the pull cord, you should feel compression, which is a bump. And I can feel it already. It says really good compression. And if you don't feel that, if the pull cord comes out real easy, all the way out real easy, and there's no bump at all, you don't feel any bump, you most likely have a valve that's stuck, which something that you're not going to get into. Take it to a small engine place. That's probably going to be the problem. When they sit a long time, that can happen. Let's go ahead and give it a pull. All right. Absolutely nothing. All right, so if it's really cold outside, I highly recommend using the electric starter. Okay, so here's the electric starter. This is the cap right here. A lot of people ask me, oh, where do you get the cap? Well, if the cap breaks, it's up to you. You can go to LCT, I think, and see if you can order it on Amazon or whatever. But this is a waterproof area right here, and there is no electricity going through this unless you have it plugged into your cord. So you really don't need this cap, but it's nice to have until they break off and you lose them. You're going to use a 3-prong extension cord, and this is a 16 gauge. I always recommend that. Just look at your starter wire right here that goes from your push button to your starter, and that is 16 gauge. Try not to go any longer than 20 feet. They do pull a lot of amperage. I don't recommend pushing the button for more than 3 to 5 seconds at a time. If you go any more than that, you can actually put a pretty good load on this thing and you can burn it up if not careful. So don't just keep cranking over the starter. This only spins the engine. The electric starter only spins the engine. It does not start it Everything on the carburetor side and the fuel side all has to be correct, and of course the spark side, but everything has to be correct on that side for this starter to really help you. But when it's cold outside, this is why I give you the electric starter, because the engine oil gets really thick. So sometimes if we have some issues with the carburetor, using the electric starter, you can kind of push it through and sometimes it'll start. So we're gonna go ahead and try to start this again. Gonna go ahead and just check all our buttons here. We're on. I'm not gonna prime it anymore. I am gonna leave it on choke. I don't want to flood it. It's only been a minute, so we're going to go ahead and hit this and see if we can get it started. All right, I'll take the choke off, try it that way. So as soon as your engine starts, you're going to unplug this. Be careful not to twist this too much or kind of pry on it too much, because you can break the tongs in there, and then once you do that, you can't just replace this. You have to buy the whole starter. Very expensive. Now I'm going to show you how to drain the bottom bowl of the carburetor, and that may help us get this thing running, but to do that I have to put this up in the air. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up in the air to give you guys a better shot at it. So I want to show you, here is the primer bulb. Underneath here is the carburetor bowl. That is normally where the gas goes bad from sitting. It's not usually what's in the gas tank that goes bad, it's usually what's in the carburetor. And right here, there's a drain. Not sure if you guys can see that. Let me zoom you in here. Bottom of the carburetor has 2 bolts. Very important that you do not unscrew the center bolt, because that'll drop the bowl, and there's a gasket in there which you can lose. And if you lose that gasket, not lose it, but it'll drop down. Good luck trying to get that back up in there, because you guys will be doing this on the ground. Really hard to do. But this one here that has a little bit of a long shaft that comes down to that bolt, this is there for a reason. This is there so you can drain the bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the fuel right here. Turn it to the off position, and it says off right there. Straight up and down is off. And I'm going to go ahead and get it's a 10mm socket. And we're going to go ahead and get this open, drain the bowl, and then I'm going to turn the fuel valve on to see if it'll drip down through there. The nice thing is about this engine is that the LCT engine, they actually give you a little bit of room to work, which is nice. All right, if you guys are allergic to gasoline, or if it's going to mess up your hands, make sure you wear gloves. I'm going to see if this thing will drain. Okay, so it is draining right now. It just stopped. That may be just what's left from the fuel line down to the carburetor. I just gave it a little bit of a smell. It smells a little bit, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, you guys can't see that really, but it's not orange, it's yellow. That's your typical gasoline. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the fuel valve now and see if we can get it to flow. Okay, so it is dripping down. Now, if you're not getting any fuel flow, that means that your needle valve inside that carburetor is stuck. And if it is stuck, sometimes, I'm going to turn the fuel back off again. I just let it flow through there. What you can do sometimes is you can tap. Don't tap too hard, but tap on the bottom of that carburetor bowl, and it'll dislodge the float from being stuck. I'm going to go ahead and turn the fuel valve back on again, get some more flowing through there. Sometimes just by doing that, it'll actually get the good gas from the tank through to the carburetor and get it to flow, and it'll start. Now, if it doesn't start now, then we're going to go to the next step. But first, you got to make sure you put I just turned the fuel back off again. We're just going to go ahead and put the bolt back in. It's a 10mm wrench. Just going to snug it up. I have it plugged in to the electric. I'm just going to go ahead and turn the fuel valve on again. I'm going to put the choke on. I'm going to prime it a couple times. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times. All right, absolutely nothing. Okay, at this point, as long as you have spark, which we're going to check now, it's real easy to do. Well, if you don't have a spark tester, which I don't believe most of you guys will not, right in here, this is your spark plug wire that goes to your spark plug. Be careful taking that off. You don't want to pry right here. You want to try to get that metal. So I want to get a pair of pliers. Just gonna try to pry up on that boot to get it up and out of there. Okay, I don't want to yank on this cord. If you pull this cord out of this boot, good luck. It's a process getting it back in there. I don't have a video on that, so try not to do that. All right, so it's a real long metal one. Spark plug is right here. I am using a 13/16 deep socket or a spark plug socket. The only difference between a deep socket and a spark plug socket is that they have a rubber boot inside. And actually I can already tell that, oh, my rubber boot is caught up on inside on the spark plug, and it's because they don't give you enough room in here. So what I need in here is I normally don't have too many problems. I had to put a 3/8 swivel on my 3/8 drive socket and see if I can get this out. I'm not a fan of the LCT engines whatsoever. I actually don't mind the China motors, but this is one I don't like. All right, well it was stuck, but it came unstuck and it's actually unthreading. I hope. It feels tight, but you guys might have to take this shield off to get a good, it looks like that shield is not, it may not be easy. It might be just a couple bolts to take that off. If you guys don't have the correct socket or a bendable swivel, you might have to take this cover off and get your socket in there that way. Now at this point, I don't want to go too far out because it might get hung up on a muffler, so I'm going to try to get the socket out of there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and, since it's loose, I'm going to go ahead and put this is what they call a spark plug installer and remover, and it's just a flexible rubber hose. I haven't been able to find this exact same one. It's a very old one. I'll put a link in the description to a couple that I found on Amazon and a link in the description below, but you can use a piece of fuel line if you have a piece of fuel line. Now we're taking a look at this spark plug, and it's definitely, man, it's definitely been used. Like it never changed the oil. That's why his oil was looking a little bit darker than normal. Lots of carbon. Looks like he might have been running it on choke. But now here's where we're at. We want to be able to see if this thing will fire up. First thing you do, this is what they call a torch right here. This might be the original. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this. If it's a 6 or a 7, which this is an F6 RTC, I try to use NGK spark plug, so that's going to be an NGK BPR 6ES. I'm going to go ahead and replace that. You can cross-reference this spark plug over online. Okay, so I have my NGK BPR 6ES. I'm going to put it on either a piece of fuel line or your spark plug installer. It makes it so much easier to try to get it threaded correctly. If you press in right on the threads, it should start screwing in. Get it all the way to where it's snug. Get your socket on there, and like I said, I'm using a 3/8 adapter just because it's too hard to get my wrench in there with an extension. And I do not torque these. I take them about 3/4 of a turn. You feel them getting snug, and just snug them up. After they hit their crush washer, and what I mean by the crush washer is this little silver washer right here is what they call a crush washer, and you can see it flopping around right there. Once you feel the spark plug thread into that point, usually 3/4 of a turn. Don't go too crazy, but you want to make sure it's firm. I know there's a torque spec for every spark plug, but I just do it by hand, and I've never had a problem. Do not forget to put your spark plug boot back on. Now we're going to try this and see if he had a bad spark plug. Usually you'll feel it click in. There it is. That's just really, don't like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to give it another fire here. Okay, choke on, 1, 2, 3, 4 primes, switches on, feels on. We're gonna give it a bump. Well, two things. One, we know it runs. It was a bad spark plug. But the second thing is it runs like crap. And I was trying to play with the carburetor here, the choke, and see if I can get it to smooth out. Sometimes if you put the choke in the on position a little bit, you can get it to smooth out. This obviously did not smooth out. It's popping and missing. The carburetor's definitely got a problem. But if I needed to absolutely get my snow blown, yes, it was a bad spark plug, and we could get this thing out there and try to get the job done. It definitely needs to have the carburetor rebuilt at this point. We did get it up and running. The next thing we would have done if it wouldn't have started was we would have pulled the spark plug back out again, and you would have put a little bit of fuel inside the throat of the engine right there where the spark plug hole is, and then you screw your spark plug back in again. And you know if you have spark, if that fuel inside the cylinder fires up and then runs out, and then it'll stop, and then it won't run. And that means 100% that you have a carburetor problem. So now I'm going to move you guys around a little bit, and I'm going to show you how, in my opinion, how to remove this carburetor, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, one, turn it off, make sure it doesn't start on you. I'm going to pull the pull cord out of the way just so you can see the fuel shut off. We're going to turn the fuel to the off position. I'm going to take this muffler bracket off because I think we have to take this off to get this off. So I'm going to take this muffler bracket off. It's a 10mm socket. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch 10mm. And as you can see, they're recessed in there. So putting them back on, I'll do the trick with do a paper towel inside here, and then you put your bolt inside there, and then you can screw it in. We have two on this side. Going to use a magnet so I don't lose these guys. All right, so there's one here. Let me see if I can get this off. That might help. All right, so that was it. Because it was sitting on this right here, which is, we're going to have to take this off. So now this knob, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the run position. So that's choke off. And you have to pry this up. And that can get a little bit tricky. Usually 2 screwdrivers on each side. Or my clip tool. Usually a clip tool, I can just pop it up. Just like that. Just make sure you remember which way it goes on. And there's a little tab right here, but it does just pop off. Just be careful. Okay, at this point we have 2 bolts here, and we have 2 on the side here, and they're both 10mm socket. Okay, so I did notice that the 4 bolts here that go on here are a little bit shorter than the muffler bolts. So keep that in mind, that the muffler shield bolts are a little bit longer than the ones that go on the outside shield there. Now this should be loose here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and you have to pop it up off the choke lever and then swing it out of the way. Now, okay, so all this electronic stuff here you can leave on. There's a primer line that goes to the carburetor that you're going to have to pull down, and it does have a nice little clip on this one. And then once you pull that clip down, you should be able to pop this down, or use the small screwdriver, pair of pliers. I'm going to use my clip tool and try to pry down on that. I have this up in the air, so it's kind of bouncing around. Sorry about the movement on there. All right, so now this is down. We can put it out of the way since we don't have the primer line on. If the primer line's in bad shape, which is this guy right here, if this is in bad shape, you want to replace it. This one here is in good shape. Okay, so a couple things we have to do. One, we pinch this off with a pair of hose clamp, and then we have to take this clamp off of here, and then we have to take off these 2 bolts, and it should be able to slide this out. This cover here can also be removed to help us out because we do have to pull this cover off this choke right here. So I'm going to go ahead and move this off to the side. And these bolts, you can tell, are silver in color, so they just go with the silver heat shield here. Just put that down off out of the way, and that'll allow us to get into here a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and pinch this off and get this out. Now I use a plastic fuel line clamp. I gotten these from Harbor Freight. They work great. I think they come in a pack of 3s. pair of regular pliers, like so. I use my clip removal tool and just, if it's really, really snug right here, use the pair of pliers and twist it left and right, and that'll get it unstuck. And then you can just use your pliers or a clip tool remover. I'll also put this in the description below. Now, there was a little bit of fuel that came out of there, and like I said, if you guys have sensitive skin, beware. With the fuel shutoff valve too, don't think that's going to work. Just get yourself protection here. Now, at this point, you also want to just drain a little bit of the fuel from the tank, even though we did drain it through the carburetor bowl, just to make sure that you're fresh and clean when you're putting this back on again. And if this is in bad shape, definitely replace it. Now these collars right here, they're 210 millimeters. These are actually nuts, and I don't think you can mess them up reverse-wise. I think they make that, yeah, I think you can put them on both ways. It's not gonna make any difference which way you go. Yeah, they're fine. Threaded bolt, threaded nuts. Make sure you remember how that goes on like that. There is no gasket here. Also, this, it now comes off, and then you have to slide it up and over. All right, so now here is the carburetor. This is where all the bad stuff goes. when gas goes bad inside this carburetor, it really blocks up everything. Now, okay, so right here, all right, you have a spring, and that spring has to come off of that hole. I use a very small pair of needle nose pliers, and be very careful. Try not to bend it. Just pry it out there, let it sit off to the side. Now, this is your throttle linkage to your governor, and unfortunately this is a full throttle all the time, so you have some tension on it right there. So what you need to do is you need to pull the carburetor out. Now usually they're stuck to the manifold right there, which this one is. Take yourself a back of a hammer, something soft, your mallet, tap on it while you're pulling. I'm pulling on the bottom of the carburetor while I'm tapping on this, and it just pops out, it gets unstuck. To get this to come off, there's a slot in the top, and you have to pull the carburetor almost all the way out before the slot lines up with the rod, and then you can pick this up and out like that. And I'll show this to you. Now, there's going to be fuel on the bottom of this, but I'm going to tip it so you guys can see this. So right there is where that metal rod has to go in, and that's pretty much it. Carburetor is off. It looks new, but there is remnants of goo that has been sitting around here, and this thing was definitely not happy. And we're going to go ahead and this is the OEM carburetor is made by HUAYI. These are the OEM carburetors. They're good carburetors. We're going to go ahead and try to rebuild this. I want to show you how to do it on the bench. I also have a ultrasonic cleaner that I will be putting this in too, but most of the time you can get these things cleaned up enough that we can reuse them. But there was fuel in the oil, and that means that this needle valve in here wasn't too happy. And so I don't want that to happen again, so we're really gonna have to open this up and look at it, and we'll be right back. Let's get it to the bench. Okay, so we're here cleaning up the mess from the carburetor, fuel leaking out of here. You should probably just drain it out of the bottom of the bowl before you get it on your bench. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the choke so I can lay this flat on the bench so I can get a good grip. Now this is the bottom of the nut of the carburetor, and these can be really tight. Take that off, tap this gently, should pop down, and I can already tell, eesh, okay, that's not looking good. Shouldn't look gold color. Jet's inside here, and that jet inside there is usually what gets clogged. Now there's also an O-ring, right, that runs around this float right inside the recess right here. And you have to be careful. Hard to get parts for these things, so you either replace them or you can try to rebuild them. This pin here should move freely, and if it does not, a little bit of PB Blaster soak it, but it should pull right out. Okay, and then that your float will come right up with your needle valve. Now, if it's stuck inside there, and right inside here, where that brass valve is, that's where your needle sits. And you guys probably won't be able to see because the lighting is not good, but what I was saying about this is the spring-loaded needle valve, and this is how it's got to go. You can see the line of discoloredness. This is where bad gas was sitting on that line, and that's usually where it trickles down to the carburetor and makes things a wreck. Now you have to hold the spring and push off the, kind of have to push it off at the same time. Be careful. That's why I use a little tray, but there's a spring right here. All right, make sure you don't lose that. It goes right over the top of the needle valve, and it's spring loaded. This is the important part. This is like the neoprene. I usually put this underneath a magnifying glass because my eyes aren't that great, and I'll see how bad if there's a real bad indentation ring on here, then you're not going to use it. And I don't know if you can get the parts for these. You might just have to replace the carburetor. Also, for some reason, the chrome will delamatize, like it'll come off this and it'll start peeling. If that happens, you don't use it. I'll look underneath the magnifying glass real quick. I'll be right back. Yeah, this looks to be in pretty decent shape. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in ultrasonic cleaner, but you can just clean this up. Do not use any chemicals on this. You don't want the neoprene to get, as I say, get fat, but you don't want the chemicals to mess it up. Now, because this doesn't have an idle, we don't have to worry about it, but this big plastic round, it's a screw actually, holds in this jet right here, that red part. That's the jet it holds in. If you can do this by hand, go ahead and do it by hand. You can use a Phillips head screwdriver and unscrew it. You just have to make sure that you put it back halfway. That's what holds the jet down. So this sits halfway in between, holding that jet down. It's just a plastic screw, so you have to be careful when you put it back in again that you do not cross thread it. I try to put these in by hand. So when you put it back in to the threads, that you just make sure you put it in by hand and screw it in. All right. Now right here, this jet should pop up and out. Small screwdriver or even my clip tool works perfect right here. Pops it up and out of there. Now, this has two O-rings on it. This one's easy to see because it's a different color, but those O-rings normally don't go bad. If you see them go bad, I don't even think you can get the O-rings, so you're gonna either have to go to your hardware store or you're gonna have to buy a new carburetor. There is a small jet that's down in there. Now, with this particular engine or carburetor, you don't need to have this actually open because there's no idle. This is your idle jet. And I don't even think there's gonna be an opening down there because it doesn't idle. So it shouldn't matter, but we're gonna go ahead and use a very small piece of wire. I normally use something like this. This is from a wire brush. And these right here are cleaning brushes. Now these are wire too, and these are very small. And everybody's like, well, where do you get that? Well, these came from Harbor Freight also, and I don't even take them off of here. What I try to do is, see if you guys can see this, but I try to put the jet down in. This one does have the hole. I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see that, but see if I can show you this, guys. You can see the inside there. It's actually, yeah, you can see the wire inside there. And it's open and it's fine. But by poking that wire in there, it could have had a clog, we don't know. But you don't, this is for the idle jet and you don't really need to worry about that, but we'll go ahead, and it did have the hole in there though. It just takes a very small bristle as opposed to like my wire brush that's even bigger. This one here is much bigger. And we're gonna need this. As you can see, I've bent it in a 90 degree and a couple more angles there. Because what you're gonna do is back inside here, okay, I just turned the light on. So you see those little teeny holes way back in here? There's like 4 of them. We have to clean them out. And the way I clean them out, it's gonna be hard for you guys to see this, but I'm just gonna go ahead and stab it one hole at a time. Pretty easy. I got all 4 done, and they didn't even seem to be clogged. The big one here is the jet in here. I have a special screwdriver that I use. It's like a number 4 tip that's inside here, you see the brass part right there? It's a slot head. The threads that are inside here do not go to this jet. They go to the bolt for the bottom of the bowl. So you have to remember that's where this goes, and the jet only comes up so far, and you have to tap it out. You gotta push down on it very hard so you don't ruin the jet. It's only gonna come out until it doesn't, and it's just gonna kind of just keep spinning, and you'll be like, okay, why isn't it coming out? Well, it's done. Just take it out as far as you can. Then you're gonna tap it. It should come out. Okay, and the emulsion tube come out too, which was a little bit fast. I wanted you guys to see this all happen at once. Here's the jet. Normally this jet is clogged, and actually I can see through that jet. So that's actually not a bad thing. That's a good thing. This is the emulsion tube here, and there's very small ports in here that have to be cleaned. You can take your little wire brush tool and poke each and every one of them. Look through the center of that too, make sure that that's clear. I'm gonna put these in ultrasonic cleaner. The carburetor itself, it's gonna have ports in here. There's a hole here, there's a hole there, a hole there. At this point, you probably could use some spray, but you have to take this rubber gasket out. You don't wanna hit this rubber gasket with automotive type cleaners. It's very, very harsh when you use an automotive cleaner on this rubber stuff, and also the neoprene needle on the valve, on the needle valve. You have to be very gentle, try not to poke through this, and you can pop it up out of its seat. Once you get the tool behind it, then just slide it on out all the way around. Once you get your finger up in here, you should be able to pull this up. Now don't pull too hard, just let it come out. You don't want to break these, they're very fragile, even though they're rubber. Now if it's coated in white, like ethanol, like just dried up ethanol, you can also scrub this with some Simple Green, put it under hot water, and try to clean up your fingernails to try to scrape all that stuff off of there. And as long as it's pliable, like I can feel a little bit of dryness on this, we can try to scrape that off. Usually that's like ethanol that dries up, but we can reuse this gasket as long as it's more like rubbery. So we're going to reuse that. And also, if you have any kind of goop that's inside this groove from gas going bad, scrape all that out. This looks pretty good. And at this point right now you can see how this is dried up right here, and it's kind of different color. I think that's like the ethanol. That's all going to come clean in the cleaner. You can brush this off. If you have compressed air, that's great. I know a lot of you guys won't, but now you can go ahead and spray inside here. If you have some kind of a carburetor cleaner, you can go ahead and spray it in there, gum cutter. Be careful, that stuff is nasty, and you don't want to get it pretty much on your skin, and use safety glasses, obviously. And I also will spray inside those holes too that we already cleaned out. But I just poked them to make sure that, you know, we can use them now. Some people ask me what we can put in the ultrasonic cleaner. Putting both jets. Oh, now that was another thing. The emulsion tube fell out, and it only goes in one way. So the flat spot right here is where the jet sits on it. So you have to make sure when you put it back in the carburetor that the flat spot is going to be facing the jet. So you're just going to go ahead and put it down like that. And then you're going to put the jet in. Obviously, you can't screw it in without the threaded part on top there, and that'll go inside here. And then you have to jiggle it in till it goes in, till it goes all the way down in there, because the threads don't start for a while. Keep that in mind. Going back to what you can put in the ultrasonic cleaner, I'm going to put the jet, this jet's going in there, this jet's going in there, the emulsion tube. Also, this has everything looks, once it's drying out now, it looks like it's all ethanol corroded. So I'm gonna go ahead, put all that in there. Even the needle valve is dried up stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this in there. Float's gonna go in there, because you can see right here, whatever was in that tank, I mean not tank, whatever's in the carburetor, the bottom of the bowl, see how It's like a gold color powder. I think that's ethanol, but look at this. I haven't seen one come out like all yellowish, goldish color. It's gotta be, look at my fingers. It's all on my fingers now. So I'm gonna go ahead and if you have to, you can soak this stuff. I'm not sure if they have a carb cleaner you can soak in, but just get it as clean as you can. Poke the holes that I showed you to poke. You know, if you have compressed air, blow it out. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in an ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, so I have everything back on the bench. I actually, this did not make it into the ultrasonic cleaner, but I just put it in there for about 10 minutes, and I tell you what, that really did come back nice. Pretty impressed. All right, so we have the spring, put that on there. This guy, I blew everything out, so this is a small jet, the low speed jet. This guy right here, very clean, and you can always poke through that. All right, very nice. The float pin came out nice and clean. Float, good. Okay, so to reassemble this, and I poked through all those holes and I blew everything out for the emulsion tube. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and put the emulsion tube in, just like so. The main jet. And tap it in there, just make sure it gets all the way down in there. And you don't have to, just wait until it gets snug and then give it a little extra snug up. It's brass, it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna go ahead and put the bowl gasket in now. And sometimes the bowl gasket will actually shrink up a little bit and then they're hard to get into the recess here. This one actually is not giving me any problem at all, but sometimes you have to stretch them out a little bit. This one actually looks like it might be a little bit bigger than normal, but they have to sit in that recess and they have to be flat or you won't get a good seal. Okay. Now, putting the needle valve on your float, you have to be very careful. I'm going to hold the spring down a little bit and put it up in there like so, and just make sure it's spring loaded. I like the way these are set up. Usually when you have them on right, they're going to stay on the way they should, and then you're going to put it. And also check to make sure you're clean inside there. That's where the needle valve, that's where your neoprene end is going to sit right there, right inside there. If there's any question of it being pitted or dirty and it won't come clean, replace the carburetor. All right, that's pretty much it. It's a self-adjusting float because it's spring-loaded needle valve, which is nice. Okay, so when you put the bowl on, it's pretty straightforward. There's little tabs on this bowl right here and here. And it goes into one end of the carburetor. There's a tab at the end, so it goes in just like so. All right. I guess you could do it. Let's see here. I like to have the bottom of the bowl nut on the side of the primer line. So we're going to go ahead and turn that around a little bit and just make sure it sits in right here. It's like a little puzzle, and on that side too. And then you put your bolt in. Make sure before you tighten it that you check both sides to make sure these are in correctly. Nice and tight. When you go ahead on the air side and put your low speed jet, make sure you put that in like so. It has a flat spot that lines up with the flat spot on the carburetor. Make sure that's seating down just like so on the carburetor. And then you want to if you can, put your idle screw, even though it doesn't have an idle, put it in by hand. And if your jet is in properly, it will screw in just fine. And then you're going to go halfway over the low speed jet and then stop. And so right here, we're halfway over the jet with the screw. That's what holds it in. And then we're good to go. All right, so we have it all back together again. We're gonna go ahead and put it back on the machine. Now, the carburetor, I always like to double check on how the gasket is gonna face, and this one is gonna face just like that. All right, when you put it on. This gasket is a little snug. So we're going to use the carburetor to help it on. Okay. Now before you put the carburetor all the way on, you have to put your governor rod in the slot of the carburetor, and you can only do that when the carburetor is all the way out. All right. And then you can push it in a little bit further. All the way in it goes. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the little spring on. It's like that. Push that in. I'm going to go ahead and take the fuel line, put the fuel line on here now. It's good to put the fuel line on and get it clamped down so you can release the fuel line and make sure that the carburetor is setting up properly. Okay, so if you have issues with the carburetor leaking because something's not quite right in here, it's gonna show up now. So it's a good idea to go ahead and relieve that, make sure everything's setting up okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put your cover over the front and line that up like so. Then we can go ahead and put this guy on. And it went just like that. Go ahead and tighten them up. Try to tighten them up evenly. Go ahead and put this heat shield over. Now at this point, I like to run the machine because I don't like to put it all back together again unless I know it's 100%. And all we really need to do is we need to be able to close the choke right here like that. It's not too bad. And also we can attach the primer line, which is here, so we can prime it. And everything else has already been connected, so we can turn it on. And let's see here, we're gonna put the choke on in the on position. Okay, gonna go ahead and prime it once, twice, 3 times. Choke's on. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and turn the fuel on, which I forgot to do. So now we're gonna see if anything. Just let it set up for a little bit, let the fuel head on down in there. Choke is in the on position right now. We're gonna go ahead and prime it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Well, I am very impressed. That actually runs very well. I haven't had a great success rate in rebuilding them, but this one actually turned out really nicely. The ultrasonic cleaner definitely helps. If you guys can do it by hand, great. Now, I like to leave this set up for a little while, and what I'll do is we're gonna go ahead and put it all back together again right now, but I'll let it set up overnight, and then you come back in the next day just to make sure that everything's okay. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and take the primer line off right now. I don't want to run it too much more. It'll get extremely hot for me to put that muffler on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put all the wiring back around here and then reinstall the primer line. It's kind of hard. You have to put all the electrical line around the one side of the carburetor, and then the primer line has to go on this side. And then we have to get the clip, which you guys won't be able to see this, but pull the clip up, get on the primer. Some of those didn't even come with clips. Then we're going to lift this up, and you're going to have to get up and over the choke rod right here, bring it down. I'm going to go ahead and start the two that are right there. They're the little guys. Just going to use the short ones. And I'm not going to tighten anything up until I get them all installed. Inside muffler is like that. All right, and there's one that goes in here. This is also a shorty. And the hole right there. Now you have to put the big guy on over, and it slides over. Gonna go ahead and put the paper towel on top of your socket, and if you put the bolt in there, it shouldn't fall out. It shouldn't. Then we have to find a spot where this can be a little bit tricky, so you're gonna just have to try to line it up the best you can. Once you have it started, then you can pull that paper towel. Don't forget this one down here that we put in hand tight. You just have to make sure that you have your choke. We had it in the run position when we started, and after we ran it, it was in the run position. So just make sure the arrow points to the run position. You're just going to push it down on in there, like so. That's on. I mean, that's start. That's run. And it should just lock in like so. So you're good to go there. We'll go ahead and fire this up one more time. We have the fuel in the on position. It's on run. We'll put the choke on start. I'm not going to prime it because you probably don't need to. We'll try the electric starter this time. There you have it. Okay, so there you have it. Runs real well. I'm going to go ahead, take it outside and let it run for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I bring it in, let it sit overnight. Okay, so if you made it this far, that pretty much sums it up for how to diagnose and repair a LCT engine on a Poulan 27-inch self-propelled snow thrower that did not run. If you want to stick around to the end, I'm going to show you the tools that were needed today. And if not, I do appreciate you watching my video. I hope it helped you out. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe, share my channel with your friends, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Tools I needed for today, either a 1/4-inch ratchet, whatever you guys have that'll fit your 10mm socket, a 10mm wrench. I use an extension to help me with the spark plug, 13 to 16 socket, a swivel. Now you probably won't have that, but if you have a swivel, it definitely helps getting a spark plug out. That was a little bit tricky. Those two gaskets right there, if I have the part numbers, I'll put them up on the screen for you, or I'll put them in the link in the description below. A couple pair of pliers, one's needle nose, one's just regular pliers. Phillips head screwdriver. This is like a number 4. I made this a long time ago for a slot head screwdriver that you need to help to get the jet out of the carburetor. Also, I'll put up on the screen that there's a multi-tool that one of the comments was that you can get them at Harbor Freight, and I'll put that up on the screen so you take a look at it. These are my clip removal tools that I use for everything. These come in handy for a lot of different things. I'll put a link in the description below for them. A spark plug here that I used was a BPR 6ES. That's an NGK product. You just have to cross-reference over your F6 RTC spark plug to whatever you use. You can just cross it over online. This is just a wire metal brush that I use for I I just needed it basically just for the little wires in there to clean out the low speed jet. I have a little bigger wire for the high speed jet. This is just a pick basically to help me take the bowl gasket out. Fuel line clamp, which is plastic, which is really nice. It doesn't beat up the fuel line at all. You can find that at Harbor Freight in a kit. This is the spark plug helper tool, and I can put in the link in the description below something that's similar to this that'll help, but also if you have a piece of fuel line, that'll also work as long as it sticks onto the spark plug so you don't drop it. This is a 1/4 inch electric ratchet that I use, battery operated, I use in all of my videos. A container to put your fuel in or drain your fuel from the carburetor bowl, just something you can do at Rags, of course. And this is Aspen 4. This is a great product. It's in place of gas. You don't use pump gas with this. You just use Aspen 4. This is a gasoline. Don't mix the two or you won't get the benefits that Aspen 4 is. 92 octane, no ethanol. This will stay fresh in your machine up to 2 years plus and up to 5 years in the container. It's awesome. You'll never have any problems with your carburetors anymore if you start using this. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out to see if it's something you want to do and where you can buy it online. So that pretty much wraps up for the tools that were needed. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, share my channel with your friends, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.